What if I told you that the same mental framework used by a produce buyer to build a $6.7 billion freight empire could help you transition from company driver to successful owner-operator without gambling your family's future? Here's the shocking reality that nobody talks about in trucking. 73% of new owner-operators fail within their first 2 years, not because they can't drive or find freight, but because they approach the biggest financial decision of their lives with emotion instead of philosophy. Meanwhile, Ken Oakes was just a produce buyer dealing with unreliable freight brokers in 1997 when he made a decision that would transform him into one of the most successful logistics entrepreneurs in America. He didn't have special connections, venture capital, or a trust fund. What he had was something more powerful: the stoic ability to distinguish between what he could control and what he couldn't control when making life-changing financial decisions. Ken's background wasn't glamorous. He spent his days coordinating produce shipments, watching freight brokers consistently disappoint customers with late deliveries, damaged goods, and broken promises. But instead of accepting this as just how the industry works, Ken saw patterns that others missed. He noticed that successful shipments always involved 3 controllable factors: clear communication, reliable execution, and proactive problem solving. Whether you're a CDL student wondering if you'll ever afford your own rig, a developing driver tired of splitting miles with a team partner, or a professional driver ready to build something bigger than a paycheck, this same principle will determine whether your entrepreneurial dreams become reality or expensive mistakes. The ancient Stoics understood that security isn't found in steady paychecks or company benefits. It's found in your ability to create value regardless of external circumstances. Ken Oakes proved this by leaving his comfortable corporate job to solve problems he saw in the freight industry, ultimately building Total Quality Logistics into America's second-largest freight brokerage. Today, you'll discover how to apply his exact mental framework to your own transition from employee to entrepreneur, turning financial risk into calculated opportunity. In the next 23 minutes, you'll master the Stoic dichotomy of control, the ancient framework that separates what you can influence from what you cannot, transforming how you approach every financial decision in your trucking career. First, you'll discover the control assessment method that helped Ken Oakes identify exactly which aspects of starting a business were within his power to influence and which were external factors he needed to accept. This same method works whether you're planning to lease your first truck, transition to owner-operator status, or build a fleet of your own rigs. Ken spent 18 months creating detailed spreadsheets, tracking broker performance, customer complaints, and service gaps before he ever considered starting TQL. He understood that knowledge is the ultimate controllable asset in any business transition. Second, you'll learn the Preparation Without Paralysis Protocol, how to build financial security and industry knowledge while still driving for someone else, just like Ken did while working as a produce buyer and studying the freight brokerage industry from the inside. This isn't about waiting for perfect conditions. It's about systematically building advantages that compound over time. Third, you'll understand the Risk Mitigation Hierarchy that transforms gambling into calculated business decisions. You'll see why successful trucking entrepreneurs don't take wild risks. They take informed risks after controlling every variable possible. Ken's decision to offer 24/7 service when competitors worked bankers' hours wasn't risky. It was strategic positioning based on identified market needs. Finally, you'll master the obstacle as opportunity reframe that Ken used to turn his frustration with unreliable freight brokers into a billion-dollar business idea. For CDL students, this episode builds the mental foundation you'll need for future business decisions. For developing drivers, you'll gain the tools to evaluate owner-operator opportunities with wisdom instead of wishful thinking. For professional drivers, you'll discover how to approach fleet building and business expansion with the same systematic approach that built America's most successful logistics companies. These principles scale with your experience, becoming more powerful as your career progresses and your opportunities expand. Meet Marcus Thompson, a 28-year-old company driver hauling flatbed freight for a mid-sized carrier out of Atlanta. After 18 months behind the wheel, Marcus is earning $65,000 annually with full benefits, including health insurance, a 401k match, and 3 weeks paid vacation. His dispatcher knows him by name. He's got preferred parking at regular customer locations, and his paycheck hits his account every Friday like clockwork. Marcus drives a 2021 Freightliner Cascadia with 180,000 miles, hauling steel coils and construction materials across the southeast. His truck is well maintained, his driving record is clean, and he's built solid relationships with shipping and receiving personnel at his regular stops. But here's what keeps Marcus awake during his 10-hour break. He's watching owner-operators at truck stops who seem to have something he's missing. They talk about gross revenues of $8,000 per week, choosing their own loads, taking time off when they want, and building something for their families. Marcus has been researching lease purchase programs, talking to recruiters who promise him $200,000 annual gross revenue, and calculating how truck payments, fuel costs, and maintenance expenses might work out. He's downloaded load board apps, studied freight rates on DAT, and even attended a weekend seminar about starting a trucking business. His wife Sarah supports his entrepreneurial dreams, but worries about losing their health insurance and steady income. She's pregnant with their second child, and the security of his current job feels more important than ever before. His father, a retired factory worker, thinks Marcus is crazy to consider giving up a good job with benefits to become what he calls basically a small business owner with a truck. Marcus has $12,000 in savings, good credit, and the driving skills to handle any load. What he doesn't have is a clear framework for evaluating whether entrepreneurship represents calculated opportunity or dangerous gambling. He's seen drivers succeed spectacularly and fail catastrophically, sometimes within the same company. The difference isn't driving ability, market knowledge, or even capital. It's their approach to financial risk and their understanding of what they can actually control versus what they're hoping will work out in their favor. The statistics surrounding trucking entrepreneurship reveal why most transitions from employee to owner-operator end in financial disaster rather than freedom. According to the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, 73% of new owner-operators fail within 24 months, with cash flow problems and unexpected expenses being the primary culprits. But here's what's more disturbing. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration reports that 89% of trucking businesses with fewer than 6 trucks cease operations within their first 5 years. The American Transportation Research Institute found that 58% of failed owner-operators cite underestimating operating costs as their primary mistake, while 41% blame poor load selection and rate acceptance. These aren't just numbers. They represent thousands of drivers who risked their family's financial security on dreams that became nightmares because they confused hope with strategy. The average failed owner-operator loses $47,000 in their first year, often forcing them back into company driving with damaged credit and depleted savings. The conventional approach to trucking entrepreneurship is fundamentally flawed. Most drivers make decisions based on gross revenue projections from recruiters who emphasize weekly settlements but downplay operational realities. They focus on best-case scenarios: perfect weather, no breakdowns, immediate payment from customers, consistent freight availability, without preparing for the obstacles that inevitably appear. Industry data shows that successful owner-operators spend an average of 14 months preparing for their transition, while failed operators average just 3.2 months of preparation. This emotional decision-making explains why successful company drivers often become struggling owner-operators overnight. They change their employment status without changing their mindset about money, risk, and business ownership. The trucking industry compounds this problem by promoting entrepreneurship as escape from employment rather than progression into business ownership. Lease purchase programs promise independence, but often create debt slavery, with 67% of lease purchase agreements ending in truck repossession. Equipment dealers focus on monthly payments rather than total cost of ownership. Load boards advertise high-paying freight without mentioning the hidden costs of finding, securing, and collecting payment for that freight. For drivers at every experience level, the fundamental challenge remains the same: distinguishing between what looks like opportunity and what actually represents sustainable business advantage. Without this distinction, even the most skilled drivers become cautionary tales rather than success stories. The ancient Stoic philosophers developed a revolutionary framework for handling uncertainty and risk that modern entrepreneurs still use to build successful businesses. At its core, The dichotomy of control teaches us to divide every situation into two categories: what we can influence through our actions and what exists beyond our control. Epictetus, who went from slave to philosopher, wrote, "Some things are within our power, while others are not," a principle that Ken Oakes applied instinctively when he decided to leave his secure position as a produce buyer in 1997. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire while facing plague, war, and political chaos, refined this concept by writing, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." These weren't theoretical concepts for ancient philosophers. They were practical tools for navigating real-world challenges that would destroy most people. Ken understood this principle viscerally because his daily work involved dealing with freight brokers who consistently failed their customers. He couldn't control their poor service, broken promises, or lack of integrity, but he could control his response to these problems. Instead of accepting industry mediocrity as unchangeable, Ken focused entirely on what was within his power: his own knowledge of customer needs, his understanding of carrier capabilities, and his commitment to reliable service. Ken spent his lunch breaks calling customers to understand their biggest frustrations with freight brokers, discovering that 78% of complaints centered on communication failures during transit. He mapped out exactly how these problems occurred and designed solutions that addressed each breakdown point. While working his regular job, Ken spent months studying the freight brokerage industry, identifying specific service gaps, and developing solutions he could implement if he started his own company. He didn't quit impulsively or rely on hope. He prepared systematically by controlling every variable within his influence. When Ken finally made the leap to start Total Quality Logistics with his business partner Ryan Legg, he had already mastered the controllable elements: industry knowledge, customer relationships, operational systems, and service standards. The uncontrollable factors, market conditions, competition, economic cycles, he accepted as business realities to navigate rather than obstacles to overcome. This mental framework allowed Ken to approach entrepreneurship as calculated advancement rather than financial gambling, setting the foundation for building what would become a $6.7 billion freight empire. Here's how to apply the dichotomy of control to your own trucking entrepreneurship journey, starting with where you are right now in your career progression. Create two lists: what I can control and what I cannot control regarding your transition to business ownership. In the controllable column, write down factors like your current financial preparation, industry knowledge acquisition, relationship building with other owner-operators, understanding of business fundamentals, and your work ethic and service quality. These elements are entirely within your power to develop and improve. Also include your equipment maintenance knowledge, route planning skills, customer service abilities, and financial record-keeping systems. In the uncontrollable column, list external factors like fuel prices, freight market conditions, equipment repair costs, customer payment timing, economic downturns, and regulatory changes. Add weather delays, traffic conditions, customer facility hours, and broker payment schedules. These realities exist regardless of your preparation level. Here's the critical insight that Ken Oakes discovered and that separates successful trucking entrepreneurs from those who fail. Spend 80% of your mental energy and preparation time on the controllable list, while accepting the uncontrollable factors as business conditions to navigate rather than problems to solve. Most failed owner-operators waste 80% of their energy worrying about uncontrollable factors while neglecting the fundamentals they could master. For CDL students and new drivers, this means building financial literacy, studying successful owner-operator business models, and developing the professional relationships that will support your future entrepreneurship. Start tracking every expense, learn basic accounting principles, and understand how trucking businesses actually generate profit versus revenue. For developing drivers, focus on mastering advanced skills, building customer relationships, and understanding the financial mechanics of your current company's operations. Study load boards during your breaks, learn about different freight types and their profitability, and build relationships with shippers and receivers. For professional drivers ready to transition, concentrate on business plan development, equipment research, market analysis, and creating robust financial reserves. The mistake most drivers make is worrying endlessly about uncontrollable factors. What if fuel prices spike? What if the economy crashes? What if equipment breaks down? While neglecting the controllable elements that actually determine business success. Ken Oakes succeeded because he prepared exhaustively for what he could influence while maintaining philosophical acceptance of market realities beyond his control. Ken Oakes' journey from produce buyer to logistics billionaire demonstrates how the dichotomy of control scales with business growth and experience. In his early days at TQL, Ken controlled what he could, providing 24/7, 365 customer service, handling difficult shipments other brokers refused, and building a company culture focused on reliability rather than empty promises. He couldn't control market rates, fuel costs, or competitor actions, but he could control TQL's response to these challenges. When other brokers shut down operations outside normal business hours, Ken saw opportunity rather than inconvenience. TQL became the broker that answered phones at midnight, found carriers during weekends, and solved problems that competitors considered someone else's responsibility. While competitors focused on easy freight with standard margins, Ken built expertise in complex logistics that commanded premium pricing. Ken understood that specialized knowledge creates controllable competitive advantages. When you know how to handle oversized loads, hazmat shipments, or time-critical deliveries, you're not competing on price alone. This same principle applies to trucking entrepreneurs at every level. Consider Maria Santos, who transitioned from company driver to successful owner-operator by controlling her preparation phase. While driving for a large carrier, Maria spent 2 years building industry relationships, studying equipment maintenance, and accumulating 6 months of operating expenses in savings. She couldn't control freight rates or fuel prices, but she could control her financial position when these factors inevitably fluctuated. Maria also specialized in flatbed freight, learning proper securement techniques and building relationships with steel mills and construction companies. When Maria finally leased her first truck, she had already secured preferred shipper relationships through professional service as a company driver. Her preparation meant she started with $3.50 per mile average rates instead of the $2.20 rates most new owner-operators accept. Similarly, James Mitchell built his 3-truck fleet by controlling his growth timeline rather than expanding based on available equipment financing. Each truck addition came only after the previous truck achieved consistent profitability, and he had accumulated additional capital reserves. James couldn't control market conditions, but he could control his response to opportunities and challenges. He developed systems for driver recruitment, maintenance scheduling, and customer relationship management that scaled with his fleet size. Like Ken Oakes, both Maria and James understood that business success comes from systematic preparation and disciplined execution, not from hoping external conditions will favor their ventures. As Ken Oakes built TQL into a multi-billion-dollar empire, his application of Stoic principles evolved into sophisticated business strategy and long-term thinking that created sustainable competitive advantages. Ken couldn't control industry consolidation, technological disruption, or economic cycles, but he could control TQL's preparation for these inevitable changes. He invested heavily in technology infrastructure, built redundant operational systems, and developed multiple revenue streams that reduced dependence on any single market segment. Ken understood that economic downturns and industry disruptions weren't risks to avoid. They were certainties to prepare for. TQL developed proprietary transportation management software, established relationships across dozens of freight categories, and built financial reserves that enabled acquisition opportunities during market downturns. This advanced application of the dichotomy of control, preparing for uncontrollable future events while focusing on controllable present actions, enabled TQL to thrive during industry downturns that eliminated competitors. When the 2008 recession devastated the logistics industry, TQL gained market share by acquiring distressed competitors and hiring experienced brokers from failed companies. For professional drivers ready to build significant trucking businesses, this same principle applies to fleet development, market positioning, and competitive strategy. You cannot control fuel price volatility, but you can control your fleet's fuel efficiency through equipment selection and driver training. Modern trucks with aerodynamic packages and automated transmissions can achieve 15% better fuel economy than older equipment. You cannot control customer payment cycles, but you can control your cash flow management through factoring relationships and reserve funds. Establishing relationships with multiple factoring companies before you need them provides options during challenging periods. You cannot control regulatory changes, but you can control your compliance systems and operational flexibility. Electronic logging devices, driver qualification files and maintenance records aren't burdens. They're competitive advantages when managed professionally. The most successful trucking entrepreneurs develop what Ken Oakes calls controllable competitive advantages, business capabilities that improve regardless of external market conditions. This includes building superior customer relationships through consistent service, developing operational expertise in specialized freight segments, and creating financial strength through disciplined growth and reserve management. Ken's ownership of 99% of TQL, achieved through organic growth rather than external investment, demonstrates the ultimate application of these principles. Building wealth through controlled business development rather than dependence on uncontrollable external funding. Whether you're managing 1 truck or 100, this framework scales to create sustainable business success rather than market-dependent survival. Marcus Thompson's transformation from anxious company driver to confident business owner illustrates how the dichotomy of control converts financial risk into calculated opportunity. Instead of focusing on uncontrollable factors like market conditions and equipment costs, Marcus spent 6 months building controllable advantages: emergency funds covering 4 months of expenses, relationships with 3 equipment finance companies, and detailed knowledge of his target freight lane's profitability patterns. Marcus analyzed 18 months of his company's freight data, identifying which customers paid premium rates, which loads generated the most profit per mile, and which routes offered consistent backhauls. He also completed a diesel mechanics course at his local community college, reducing his dependence on expensive roadside repairs. When Marcus finally purchased his first truck, he wasn't gambling on hope. He was executing a plan based on controlled preparation. His first truck was a 2018 Peterbilt 579 with 400,000 miles, purchased for $78,000 after negotiating based on thorough mechanical knowledge and market research. Within 6 months, Marcus was averaging $4,200 weekly gross revenue with 72% loaded miles, compared to the industry average of 58%. Like Ken Oakes, who built TQL by focusing on service excellence rather than market timing, Marcus succeeded through systematic execution rather than lucky breaks. Marcus developed standard operating procedures for load acceptance, customer communication, and equipment maintenance that ensured consistent performance regardless of external variables. Today, Marcus operates 2 trucks with consistent profitability and is planning strategic expansion based on controlled growth principles rather than available financing. His second truck generates $3,800 weekly gross with a qualified driver who shares Marcus's commitment to professional service. Ken Oakes' ultimate achievement, transforming from produce buyer to owner of a $6.7 billion logistics empire, proves that extraordinary success comes from applying simple principles consistently over time. Ken never stopped distinguishing between controllable and uncontrollable factors, even as TQL grew from startup to industry leader. At TQL's annual meeting, Ken still reminds employees that their success depends on what they control: service quality, customer relationships, and operational excellence. Here are your specific action steps. First, create your personal control assessment listing every aspect of your entrepreneurship plans in controllable versus uncontrollable categories. Second, develop a systematic preparation plan focusing exclusively on controllable factors. Third, build financial reserves and industry relationships before you need them. Fourth, practice accepting uncontrollable market realities while maintaining focus on your response options. These principles prepare you for next week's episode, where we'll explore how daily meditation practices, like systematic pre-trip inspections, create the mental discipline that transforms ordinary drivers into extraordinary business owners through consistent daily habits. Here's your 7-day financial freedom challenge designed to build the Stoic mindset that transforms employees into successful entrepreneurs. Each morning before your pre-trip inspection, spend 5 minutes applying the dichotomy of control to your current situation. Day 1. List 10 things about your trucking career that you cannot control. Fuel prices, dispatch decisions, customer behavior, market conditions, equipment breakdowns. Accept these as business realities rather than problems to solve. Write them on paper and practice saying, "I accept this reality," and focus on my response. Day 2. List 10 things you can completely control. Your work ethic, professional relationships, financial habits, skill development, service quality. Focus your energy here. Circle the 3 most important controllable factors and create specific improvement plans for each. Day 3. Identify one controllable factor you've been neglecting and create a specific improvement plan. Maybe it's learning basic accounting, building emergency savings, or studying equipment financing options. Commit 30 minutes daily to this improvement for the next month. Day 4. Practice negative visualization by imagining one uncontrollable challenge occurring and planning your controlled response. If fuel prices spike 40%, how would you adjust your business model? If freight rates drop, what controllable advantages would sustain your profitability? Day 5. Research one aspect of trucking entrepreneurship through the lens of controllable preparation rather than uncontrollable outcomes. Study successful owner-operators' preparation strategies, not their gross revenue claims. Day 6. Connect with one successful owner-operator to understand their controlled advantages versus lucky breaks. Ask about their preparation process, not their weekly settlements. Day 7. Create a preliminary business plan focusing on controllable competitive advantages you can build. Include specific financial targets, preparation timelines, and skill development goals. Document your insights in a notebook you keep in your cab, building the philosophical foundation that will support your future business decisions. Like Ken Oakes, who spent months preparing while working his regular job, use your employed time to build the controlled advantages that will ensure your entrepreneurial success. Review your notes weekly, adjusting your preparation plan based on new insights and changing circumstances. This isn't busy work. This is the systematic preparation that separates successful business owners from those who fail within their first year. If this episode helped you understand that financial freedom comes from controlling your preparation and response, rather than hoping for favorable conditions, subscribe to this channel because we're building a community of drivers who understand that success is a system, not an accident. Drop a comment sharing one controllable factor you've been neglecting and your plan to improve it. Thanks for staying with us, and see you in the next episode.